I heard from somebody that you should know that there are people who voted for you that are getting really upset with you. And I imagine that's the magic Twitter world that I completely stay out of. And I really don't care to hear about it. Votes that I know are going to be unexpected. I put something up that said, the reason I did this, like body-worn cameras was one.
Yeah, what was your vote on body-worn cameras?
That we didn't need to interject the policy of how they roll it out. We don't need to micromanage them. So I voted no on that policy. And then people interpret it as I was voting no for body-worn cameras. It was interesting. No, I am fully in support of it.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is East Anchorage Assemblywoman Karen Bronga. Karen is a lifelong Alaskan and former school teacher who has spent the majority of her life in East Anchorage. Today, we discuss her background, how she got to the Assembly, and what it's been like. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you enjoy the show. Karen Bronga, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Where are you from?
I was born in Tacoma, Washington, but my father took a job on Fort Rich when I was 2, and that's when my family moved up. We lived a short time in Grandview Gardens area, like just a year, and then they had a home built in South Mountain View, which is now called Russian Jack area, and that home is...
So you've been on the east side ever since?
Yeah, my mom is still in that house, and so right down the street from Russian Jack, that was my playground as a kid. And I went to Willowa, Wonder Park, Clark Junior High, East High. And when I was in elementary school, a cousin of mine got really involved in Nordic skiing. And he told my parents that you really should get the kids skiing because if you want them to get through high school and not get into trouble. So they got us involved in ski lessons and we started Nordic skiing, and it really, in my personal opinion, was what changed my life. I was pretty shy and it gave me that group and I worked hard and it really was my pathway to college. My siblings and I are first generation college for our family. Yeah.
Where'd you go to college?
Montana State University.
Okay. And you majored in education?
I did not. I majored in recreation. I was there with the football players, but I really passionately wanted to work in a national park. I wanted to be a park ranger or just help people learn the love of outdoors. When I got back to Alaska, I ended up getting a job as a recreational therapist at Alaska Psychiatric Institute. And I worked...
NPI.
Yeah. I worked there for 5 years altogether, but I was 3 years, and then I went to Valdez for a while with a different recreational therapy job, and then came back.
And did you always know you wanted to come back to Alaska? I know a lot of kids go to college in Montana, and the sky's the limit where they could go.
I was desperate to get out of Alaska, and I couldn't wait to leave this state. And then
what year did you go to college?
I went to college in 84.
Okay.
And at that time, at least my family, you didn't take your kid on a college trip. You looked at the brochures. There was no internet. So you weren't even doing internet searches. So you looked at the brochures, and I had met a couple people at ski races from Bozeman, and they were nice and the brochures were pretty and it had good ratings as a college, and I was offered a scholarship. That got me there.
Was it cross-country skiing scholarship?
Yes.
You were really good.
I was a collegiate All-American.
Do you still ski?
I ski every day.
Every day.
That there's snow.
Oh, because we adjusted our time today, so you can go skiing.
Yeah, I just have a passion for it. I just love it.
Well, you did a couple of good snow years in a row.
I know. It's fortunate. But anyway, back to Bozeman. Mm-hmm. I was there by the third year, I was like, I got to get back to Alaska. Mm-hmm. I've got to get back. Because even though it was sun in the winter, which I hadn't experienced, warm sun in the winter and really cool small town and all of that, all the hiking and stuff were barbed wire fences and cattle guards. And It's just not Alaska.
Mm.
And I was desperate to get back here then and was lured to come back because of the college forgiveness program that we had at the time, which you could get 50% of your student loan dismissed if you came back to Alaska to work. And that a lot of people in my era, that was one of the hooks that brought them back. When, a lot of kids, when they leave the state, they make their connections somewhere else and they get their jobs somewhere else. I was very happy for that program, and I was sorry that it was killed. I think we need it again. But
So the bribe worked.
The
You were
bribe
bribed,
worked.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm financially savvy. Should I say cheap? And I'm like, hey, yeah, I'll go back there and work. Plus, I wanted to go home. But there was other people who really did come back for that.
So API for 5 years.
Yep.
And then what happened?
I had children.
So you met your husband?
Yeah, I met my husband. So I was a recreational therapist at API and then moved to Harborview Development Center.
So Harborview was in Valdez?
Yeah, it was a home for developmentally disabled. And I did recreation programs at that facility, and I hired my husband.
So you met him in a job interview?
Yeah. He was working on the Bartlett Ferry, and he was on the state register for recreation jobs. And we interviewed him. And I did not say yes to him because he was cute, but he was pretty cute. But he had a little notebook, and he, as when they say, do you have any questions for us? He dug through his notebook and he had these questions. I'm like, oh, that is so cute. He's all prepared. So anyway, that's where we met. And Valdez, I'm telling you, when I interviewed for that job, I was told it was beautiful sunny when I went for the interview, beautiful sunny when I went to look for housing. And I was told, do not choose it based on this because it is not this. And make sure you have snow removal. I'm like, I am very strong. I can shovel. But my Lord, you need snow removal in Valdez. And it was something else. And my running shoes never dried. It was something else. And then everybody knows everybody's business. That was my only small town experience. It was amazing. The first evening Tom and I spent together, everybody knew at the facility the next day. Oh.
And you guys got together. I guess you hired him. Did you have any trepidation about starting a relationship with your new employee?
I helped hire him to work with chronically mentally ill so it was going to be a senior population. And I worked with the younger developmentally disabled. So I had input on his hire, but I wasn't his immediate
boss.
Supervisor or anything. But yeah.
Did he ask you out?
I actually chased him hard, which is so funny. But he had his brother come up and they were going to go to Denali Park. And I was laying all kinds of hints that I like Denali Park. I like to hike. And he didn't take the bait. And so I just hopped in my car after work and drove to Denali Park.
Anyway? I'm like, oh, funny seeing you here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. We're driving down the Denali Park Road, and he comes by and he goes, oh, wow, you're here?
That's something. It's like, I made this arrangement with myself to go to Denali a while ago.
And I had stopped at the park office to figure out which campground he was in. I had it bad.
Wow. And it worked.
It did work.
Because y'all are still together.
Yeah.
How many kids did y'all have?
3.
3. And you raised your kids on the east side and you're still in the same house?
No, we are not. I had purchased a home in Nunaka Valley and a little 2-bedroom, and then market crashed. It was
the late 80s.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I'd purchased it for $80,000 and we probably couldn't have got out of it. I don't know, $55,000. And so we were stuck there for a long time. And not that Nunaka Valley is a place to get stuck, because it is the most delightful neighborhood ever. You could walk to cars.
It's my district.
You're right there in Russian Jacks. It's amazing. So we ended up getting a HUD home as our next home in Nunaka, renting out the little one till the price went back up. And so we lived in Nunaka Valley for 10 years. And I stayed home with the kids. And Tom was teaching at the time. He took his first teaching job when I found out that I was having our first child. And I wanted to be home with him, made sense. And
what did he teach?
He started out as a special ed teacher at East High. And then he worked himself into doing halftime IT. And then at the end, he was doing all IT.
Gotcha. And so you had your 3 kids, you were stay at home, and then you eventually became a teacher, right?
Yep. So when I was home with the kids, I started watching a few other children to make ends meet. I was telling someone this morning, it was a funny story, that we were always really scraping for money because 1 teacher, 3 kids.
Right.
And one Thanksgiving, we got the big turkey dinner basket delivered to our door. And we're like, oh, we must look really poor. But all our kids had the bowl cuts and we had a beat up old truck and Value Village clothes. But, you can learn to live within those means. And so anyway, I decided while I was home that I should start going to school to get a teaching certificate as well. So I went to night school at APU, which was beautiful. I looked into UAA, but it was all during the day. I would have had to find childcare for my own kids, which was not going to be something we could afford. So I ended up doing the APU program, and it ended up just working out perfectly. When my youngest was 4, I did my student teaching. And then by the time he was starting kindergarten, I had a teaching position.
Where did you teach?
At Bayshore Elementary. I taught 6th grade was my first teaching gig.
Right.
And I worked so hard. I felt if I gave him an assignment, I needed to read that paper, make thoughtful comments. So the weekends at my house were piles and piles of papers that I was going through, and I had 3 little kids, and I'm like, this is going to kill me. I can't do this. And plus I was doing running club and 6th grade camp and every activity for the school and driving across town. And I heard about a position open at Wendler and interviewed it. There was a science and a history and a PE. And so I went in, I could do any of these. I had a K through 8 certification. And I got home and I immediately had this call from the principal, and she said, we just think you would be perfect for family consumer science. If as soon as you left, we knew that. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I had no idea what it was. I'm going to sound really dumb.
No, I was about to say, I was like, what's family consumer?
So it didn't occur to me that I should ask what it was because I didn't care. To me, though, consumer science sounded a bit like I was taking, like personal finance. It was going to be like that, learn how to write checks. I'm like, I can do that. That sounds great. I went to get my key the next day and take a look at my classroom, and I open up the door, and it's lined with Bernina sewing machines in the classroom, and there's 4 kitchens. And I'm like, oh, shit. I'm the home ec teacher.
Wow. So they just changed the name.
Yeah. It became part of career tech, and the focus, instead of being a homemaker, was more skills that could get you a job, and being able to cook without food poisoning someone or burning down a place was an important job skill. And yeah, I did that for 5 years. And I was a shaky sewer, and it turned out to be perfect because I could understand you don't want to rip that seam out.
Right.
I get it. Just make another one on the other side. That's fine. But it was good for beginners because I wasn't picky about it. It was just like, let's learn how to do this. Let's learn how to be safer on a machine, and let's try to make something. And I have the most students in town from those family consumer science days that come running up and say, I know you. You were my home ec teacher. And then they sometimes go, I wasn't very nice to you.
Man, I need that class. Confession, I have no idea how a sewing machine works. It's like it's magic to me. Like, I don't know what's happening, and I would definitely get hurt.
Yeah. You can definitely screw them up. Most people don't know there's this thing on the side called a hand wheel. And I learned this while teaching. If you spin it the wrong way, makes everything knot up inside. And you have to get a repairman. So I drew arrows on all the hand wheels. This way only.
And did you finish your career teaching
No.
that?
So I did do a little bit of moving around. So I heard about this new health. I was out on a hike with a friend. She goes, they're starting elementary health. And a friend of mine is interviewing for it. I'm like, what?
Right.
That sounds fantastic. So I did some checking into it, and I had like a lot of health college courses, and I'd worked in behavioral health, and I ended up getting hired at Scenic Park Elementary School, and I would go half-time there and half-time at Cassoon Elementary School. So I had kindergarten through 6th at one school, kindergarten through 5th at the other. And I remember thinking, what have I done? But what I found out is you can make learning about your body and all of that really fun.
Yeah, and most kids have a natural curiosity for that
They're
stuff.
absolutely. They loved it. And I feel like I really may have changed lives in that, just their curiosity. And I had a lot of comments about kids wanting to be doctors after that, and parents saying, they won't even let me buy Pepsi anymore. And they're little sponges at that age, and that's the best time to hit them with health. I was really happy that we really pushed that safe touch, my body is mine. And I had 6th graders that I was able to thread in there like some dating safety early on. I remember one lesson where they had a red flag, yellow flag, green flag. And if someone says to you this or that, is that a warning sign? Is that, and they would hold up things. It was pretty interesting. Like my boyfriend wants to know where I am every minute. And they were like, green flag. Isn't that great? He really cares about me. I'm like, no, he's controlling you. Red flag. So
That's so interesting. And did you do 20 years?
I did.
Were you tier 2?
I was.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. And so I have actually retired from the state as well. So I got my 5 years in tier 1 there.
When you were doing recreational therapy?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So yeah.
That was very fortunate.
And as a teacher who retired tier 2 and state employee who got vested in tier 1, it sounds like you were invested in staying in Alaska no matter what. But did it play a role? Was it an incentive?
For sure. I keep hearing about police officers that they get fully trained and then they take off. The same thing with teachers. It is hard. It's a hard gig. And you stay at it and working at it because I've already put 5 years in it and I'm building this up. And you don't leave the profession. You figure out how to do better at the profession when you're building wealth like that, when you're building a future. And it's way different now. The teachers will just drop and move because there's nothing holding them. And
did your husband also retire as a teacher?
he did. He had 29 years. He put in a lot of years, and he was always at East High. He never moved.
So I'm going into uncomfortable territory. But part of the reason teachers are devalued in some ways because we think of it as a woman's profession.
Oh, exactly. And furthermore, you talk about the devaluation between middle school and college, the devaluation between high school and elementary.
Mm-hmm.
Elementary teachers are out there with the orange vest directing traffic in the morning and in the afternoon when they should be talking to parents in the afternoon that have a question about their child or should be making sure their classroom is completely prepped and ready for the 30 people that are about to come barreling through the door. More and more it's happening where they can't find a substitute teacher and you end up taking 2 classes for an afternoon. It's madness.
Absurd.
And if that happened at high school, my husband said, you would be paid as a substitute teacher along with your regular salary. But no.
Because a man's not going to do 2 jobs for the price of one.
Right.
In our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're taking advantage of the elementary school teacher who is most of the time a woman.
There are more likely women in the elementary and they get pushed around.
It's been normalized.
It's been normalized and you feel like a bad guy if you stand up. When I said I don't think I should have to go to 3 schools. One time I had too few classes at one school, and it was like I was a criminal because I complained about going to a third school. A lot of people just want to do the
Get
right
along.
thing. They just want to get along.
They want to be the nice. They don't want to be labeled difficult.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
I remember when I met you the first time, you were the president of the Scenic Foothills Community Council.
I attended via Zoom. You ran a very tight ship, a very tight meeting. And I guess, was that your first foray into politics?
Yes, it was.
How did you end up as the president of the Scenic Foothills Community Council?
I walked into a meeting when we first moved to our neighborhood because I was so worried about the lack of trails, the lack of pedestrian routes in the area. And I wanted to see what I could do to help with it. So I went to a meeting just to let them know we're new to the neighborhood. We want to be on a committee or something. And I left that meeting as the secretary because they were looking for a secretary.
Wow.
And
what year was that around?
2013.
Okay.
And anyway, so that's what got me started. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I did the vice president. And then, just by default, you end up eventually taking your president turn. And
my second meeting at Campbell Park Community Council, I became part of the board. My second meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Because I just happened to be a board election and there was no one to run for treasurer. And they said, Andrew, you can run for treasurer. And I was like, how much money will I be managing? And they said 0. And I said, okay.
Okay. Perfect. Oh, that's funny.
While you were on the board of Scenic Foothills, it got intense because there was the proposal to build the 1,000 person homeless shelter at Elmore and Tudor.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's when I attended your meeting, was talking about there was resolutions coming forward and discussing that.
Right.
So I would assume, and maybe my assumption is wrong, that it got really intense and more involved for you during that period.
Exactly. And then the bus barn was pretty
Oh,
huge.
yeah.
When
That was
right before that was the bus barn. And that really...
For listeners who don't remember the bus barn, just explain what the proposal was and what the resistance was.
So they wanted to take the land near the Tozer track and turn it into grocery store because it is a food desert in that area. And the buses are stored in that area. So there was going to be a development and then a grocery store. So the buses needed to go somewhere, and they were looking at the lot next to Totem Theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I had remember going to university area community councils when we lived in College Gate and hearing a constituent talk about smelling exhaust from her house over by Piper Street and how bad it was. And anyway, there's nothing that gets people to a meeting like something controversial. Like Northeast has always got huge meetings, but they've always got big things going on. We rarely have that big thing going on, but when it happens, it brings people out.
Scenic Foothills is an interesting community council because you only meet 4 times a year.
We really meet more than that.
But you have 4 scheduled meetings. Y'all meet every 3 months scheduled.
Yeah. And we were meeting on the interim more as a neighborhood talking, a chance for neighbors to talk and not have like the presentations. But the bottom line is we don't really have any businesses. We don't have liquor licenses. We don't.
I want to bring up that bus barn issue because, and you could correct me here, but they had to move the bus barn because they couldn't have a grocery store with a bus barn next to it because of the fumes or whatever. Was that correct?
I thought they wanted to build some housing. So it was like a planned development.
Uh-huh.
I think the buses moving was because they wanted that land. But I could be wrong.
Maybe I misinterpreted it, but I had thought that they weren't able to have the bus barn there because they couldn't have the grocery store next to the bus barn. And then that actually got brought up when people were like, so we're going to put 1,000 unhoused people next to the bus barn? Like it's not safe for a grocery store, but it's safe for a 1,000 person shelter. Yeah.
And that shelter, why I threw it out in a meeting the other day. Why are we still storing it? What is going on? A woman approached me about possibly purchasing it for the pickleball club. And I was told that there's a plan for it. And I don't ever trust that it's not going to get back on the docket
It
again.
needs to be used for something. We purchased it. We paid for it. Paying for storage just seems like such a waste.
And we're paying Eagle River to store it in their Parks and Rec maintenance garage parts. And then it's still down the lower 48, part of it being stored at $5,000 a month. And it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Let's get to the assembly. You were the president of Scenic Foothills. You presided over some pretty contentious meetings. You got, what's it called? Like screen bombed or whatever?
Oh, yeah, we did. I guess it's, what is it, Zoom bombed?
Zoom bombed. Yeah, like people took
Yeah.
over and put pornographic.
Oh my God, I
messages.
looked back at that and I'm going, oh no. Danny?
The vice president.
As they were slowly drawing unmentionables on the sketch pad. We're like, anyway.
That's so funny.
And we had another bombing that had to do with masking. And the lady lived in Eagle River and she hopped into the Zoom and I don't know, she had her face against all you could see was like her nose and an eye. And she kept interrupting the meeting to say, well, I've been looking for you guys. We have to pass this resolution tonight. And I'm like, oh, that's not how it works. And I kept trying to explain. That was probably the worst one. And it turns out she was all wrapped up in a certain church that has a lot of conflict with the East Side area, certain large church. And I think they had been sent out, the flock had been sent out to go and try to get masking mandates killed.
It's interesting because there was a lot of scripted protest at assembly meetings, people being given talking points and saying, wait in line, and you're just going to read these things. It doesn't seem like it's that big of an issue now, is having people show up who are like reading talking points.
Yeah, you don't see it now, but like a lot of people speak to what's not being
like this, like we're not talking about that right now.
Like we're talking threeplex to fourplex, and this lady was talking about all the hotels, and you need to stop building hotels, and this is just going to make hotel building easier. I'm like, wait, you might want to read it again.
Right.
But I don't blame them. There's a lot going on, and full disclosure, my God, when they changed the order of the day and all of that, I am like flipping through, and then it's maddeningly frustrating, all the S versions and things that get added at the last minute and laid on the table. And
100%. I feel like the assembly is much more complicated than the legislature. I've been to a jillion assembly meetings and I still don't understand the numbering code. Even last night, the chair was reading off, I don't know, some grouping of ordinances or whatever, and people were laughing because it was just like this long string of numbers and letters, and it just kept going and going and going.
Well, that was the Chugach electric easements, and it was doing every, the
Code
compass
for-
road,
yeah.
the compass, the coordinates for all of these different places where that easement. And I said to Felix, can we say waive reading? Because sometimes they do that. And he goes, not on this. There's certain ones you have to read every word in the preamble, and some you don't.
And I'll just say for me, I hate acronyms and I hate numbered ordinances or House bills or Senate bills or anything because it doesn't mean anything. Tell me the name of it. Tell me what you're talking about.
Honestly, 103.25.
Yeah, who cares?
Can you tell me triplex to fourplex? That's meaningful to me. These numbers and
I'm going to tell you something. I was in a group chat and they said you should talk about, it was a title and some numbers. I responded with, what is that? And they responded with laughing emojis and said, are you kidding? And I was like, no, I'm not kidding.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I feel better about that then, because I go to community council and I talk about those issues, short-term rentals.
Call it short-term
whatever.
rentals. Call it the triplex, fourplex ordinance, but don't call it a long number.
Yeah, it just makes people sound smartsy, and
It excludes people. It
It
excludes
does.
average people from being able to participate and discuss, and makes them feel dumb and not want to be a part of it.
I wish that we had like a master, like one screen that had the master agenda and you had a little dot
To show where you were.
and the other screen would have the ordinance up. But people are sitting there going, I don't even know what.
And all the paper that's wasted because
All the
you
paper.
guys have like 100 pieces of paper for every assembly meeting. And some people go in and collect everything. You know why I don't go collect it? Because I can't figure out what page we're on.
I know. I know. If it wasn't in the binder. Oh my gosh. So you probably want to know why I ended
Yes.
up getting
How did you
on
end
the
up on the assembly?
assembly is first off, my dad passed away the year before I got on the assembly, and he was as far right as you could get. If you too young to know Archie Bunker, but my dad was
A lot
the
of listeners
original.
know Archie Bunker.
That my dad was the original. And so I grew up in a household of that. But one thing that stood true is he loved his community. He fought for things in his community. And he often said, if politicians would just think for themselves, if they're just going to vote on the party line, why don't we just send 2 of them to Juneau and they can arm wrestle?
Mm-hmm.
And it really rung true is that if you can't think on your own and think about your community and vote in truth. So that was one thing. Next thing is I'd never really done a brave thing in my life. I hate public speaking. I have a hard time with all these ordinances, and I really haven't been involved in politics, but I really wanted to make a difference. And I thought, you know what? I was asked to do this, and I was told there was a need.
And you replaced Forrest Dunbar?
Yes.
So you started earlier than that seat would have. Is that right?
Yeah, because I'm a 2-year term.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I finished his one. He did 1 year of his 3-year. I'm doing the 2 years. So anyway, when I was asked, I thought a lot about it, and retirement's been pretty sweet. But I was told by another assembly person that sounds like a really stupid reason, but I was at a rally that Genevieve Mina spoke at, and she was talking. It was when Roe v. Wade fell, and just talking about how we're in the crosshairs. And if we don't fight to make a change, this could get worse. And she talked about making sure your friends registered to vote, and everybody cheered. And then she said, and make sure that you get out and vote. And everybody cheered. And then she said, and run for office. It's silent. And I'm like, oh my God, that is the problem. Who wants to subject themselves to that? And so that rang in my head is, you know what? I'm going to do the best I can. I may not know everything, but I certainly am going to do my best to try. And I certainly care about the East Side that I would be representing.
It is a small minority of people who run for office. And it really is coming down to that moment of realizing that somebody has to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm the only person that it says urgent.
Right. And there's other people, I think, I wonder if I'd hung back. I've gone to a couple things and met people, and they said, oh, if nobody had done it, I would have ran. And I'm like, okay, that's easy to say at that point.
It's easy to say.
So I don't know, but I'm glad I stepped up, and I'm glad I'm having this experience. And
it seems like assembly is a full-time job.
It is.
It's not paid very well. Maybe not as bad now, but was extraordinarily disrespected by many people who showed up at assembly meetings. So it's who's going to sign up to do something where you're not paid very well, you don't have very good benefits, and people hate you.
yeah. Yeah, it's the first few meetings. There's a woman who really throws a lot of spice out there, and she chooses you. She looks you dead in the eye. And Mrs. Bronga, when you said, and anyway, it's quite alarming that people are they're very attack mode when you don't go their way. But I can say it's a lot easier than people had it before. And the whole assembly is nice to each other. I was talking about Kevin Cross and leaving the position. And,
So his official resignation was announced last night.
and
He represents Eagle River.
And I understand you miss out on summer a lot with these meetings and all of that. But even though he's on a different political spectrum of me, I really respect him. He's very kind, and he's one of the first really welcoming people on the assembly for me. And so I think you see this side of us fighting on the dais, and then there's this other side that we all really respect each other. And I think that's
It's interesting that you brought him up. I do remember a couple of cases where the vote was 9-3 and Kevin Cross was with the 9 and you were with the 3. And you two have, at least in a couple of instances, switched places.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. There's a couple.
And do you think that's your dad's influence, that you're going to think for yourself, you're going to vote for yourself, you're not going to be told how to vote?
Absolutely. And I have some very good friends that really follow politics, that really are progressive, that told me, please move on. When you get in that assembly, we don't want the fighting to continue. Try to move on. And I know that I'm coming from a place where I didn't see a lot of the badness happen, but I really took that to heart, that I'm not going to just fight about every little thing.
And this is philosophical, but I feel like in this particular case, where you have an administration and an assembly who, for the most part, seem to be butting heads most of the time, there is the higher road to take is just to not have the last word, not have a win, to just be willing to work on the issues, even if it means allowing somebody who might be working against you all the time to have little wins here and there, just because it's better for the community.
Exactly. It's important to me to have a working relationship with the administrative staff. And I'm trying really hard that like Ann Helzer helped me with the Chugach Electric rewrite.
And Helzer is the municipal attorney.
Yeah. And we created a bond in that she was really good at digging out the language of how those right-of-ways came to be given to Chugach Electric and the year. And it's nice. It was nice working in that relationship that I feel like it's really helped, because when I go by, I'm like, how's your daughter's birthday party? And she's, did you have a good ski this weekend? And we need more of that.
We do need more of that. And I don't know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it because it happens to me, which is that my quote unquote, my people, progressives, I disappoint them when they feel like I extend too many olive branches, when I take too many steps towards cooperation, because for some people, it's very important that they never lose any ground. And I don't know why, but somewhere deep inside me, I'm willing to give so that we can move forward.
Yeah, me too.
And so I don't know if you've experienced
Oh, yeah. I heard from somebody that you should know that there are people who voted for you that are getting really upset with you. And I imagine that's the magic Twitter world or something that I completely stay out of. And I really don't care to hear about it. I've been trying votes that I know are going to be unexpected, that I put something up that said, the reason I did this, like body-worn cameras was one.
Yeah, what was your vote on body-worn cameras?
That we didn't need to interject the policy of how they roll it out.
You didn't need to micromanage them.
We don't need to micromanage them. And though it's been a slow rollout, and though people are disappointed, that to me is causing conflict when we try to get in there and micromanage. And then we've got a union involved, that if we say this is how you're going to roll it out, then they've got to go back and figure out if that's allowable. So I didn't want to slow it down, so I voted no on that policy. And then people interpret it as I was voting no for body-worn cameras. It was interesting. No, I am fully in support of it, but I feel like at this point, they need to get it rolled out. They need to figure out how to show the public how they work, and we don't get to tell them how to do that.
Yeah, I feel that it's a difficult road to walk to decide who do I need to reach out to and respond to and give an explanation to, and who is just, try to generate scandal when there isn't any.
Yeah.
It's tricky because I think that if you don't respond to anything, then you're just
You're not listening to me.
right.
You don't listen to your constituents. That's the other thing. Austin Quinn Davidson, if you sent her a message, she
responded.
always responded. So I have tried to respond to every single one of them. And
It's
a lot.
incredible. And I remember that. Austin Quinn Davidson, when I would send emails, she's not my assembly member, but I remember she would respond. And it would usually be a sentence that you knew she'd written.
yes,
And
it never looked like it was the aide pumping out a.
right. And straight up, I don't know how she did it. I could see why she would need to take a break.
Yeah, I don't know how she did that, but I'm really trying. And then I like to look at them all myself because I do think these are important to read and you get a real good pulse on what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Is there any particular issue that you're invested in right now?
The only thing is a resolution honoring the Nordic Skiing Association for their 60 years. I'm working on that. I want to work on making diet supplements and muscle building supplements be 18 or older. So they would have a bar scan type thing that you have to check an ID. I was talking with the Alaska Eating Disorder Alliance of what a problem that is.
That's interesting because I wonder, I think it's great for local people to make local laws, but my concern is so the municipality of Anchorage makes that rule, but they'll just drive to Wasilla. And
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it won't work. I'm chewing on it. They also are very interested in, and these are more state level, but the other one was the algorithms for Facebook and what it's doing to our children.
Right.
And
Well, and some of that stuff, we've looked at that, like AI, staying abreast of what's happening with artificial intelligence and how fast it's developing and how little oversight there is and what we can do at the state level. And really some of that needs to be at the federal level. So I understand that feeling of wanting to do something, but not really being sure if you're the right person to do it.
so there's the lady that is helping the Alaska Eating Disorder is from Harvard, and she's got all kinds of model legislation of places that have passed some tightening of restrictions. And I'm looking at that. The homelessness situation will continue to drown us unless we move somewhere. I'm a sponsor on the Giving Money to the Coalition to End Homelessness to try this, a pilot program, but I really want to add they're very much no barrier or low barrier. And I am suggesting a S version that includes each of these people that we look at for choosing who goes to the apartments, whether they're residents of the Alex or the shelter, that they have what we're calling, instead of individualized education plan, we have an individualized independence plan. And they sign a document that I am ready to work on these things. Here are some of the things that are roadblocks to my independence, and I am willing to work on them. And not that they would get kicked out if they slid, but I feel like it's really important that there's some ownership. I hear from a lot of people that this is $4.7 million for 150 people. And what are they doing? And if they're going to go to one of those apartment buildings and deal drugs or, just never move out of there, I want to see them progressing in some way and some sort of contractual, I am going to try. And I think in education, the goal setting is how you progress. And I think this goal setting needs to happen too. And as much as possible, doubling them up instead of single rooms, just because of the enormity of the number of people who are in need.
From an insider's perspective inside the assembly, what is the current state of homelessness in the municipality?
The housing first, the mayor saying he buys into that is huge. And I think that we're in a better place than last year, for sure.
But we had the Sullivan open last year.
But we had the Sullivan open last year. But I think they are rapidly moving from the 56th Avenue shelter
Solid Waste Services building.
into hotels when rooms become available. So they're not just sitting there. There is a little bit of a pipeline happening. I've heard that there's been 40 moved over to hotel rooms, which is good. And then I think there's something like 30 who have come out of the hotel rooms to real housing. So there is a pipeline going on now. There's kind of a pipeline.
And I know there was a lot of concern that we didn't have a warming tent or any warming area. What's the state of warming?
We identified a church in Fairview that was going to be have a contract to do a warming center. And Fairview community came unglued, is my understanding. And so then the vendor failed to show that they had insurance that would cover them. And so that was the writing on the wall. So we're no longer contracting to have them. But I got a message from a constituent who said, I thought there was going to be no warming center here. And I walked in and they are warming people. And Alexis Johnson said, we can't say they can't open their doors and warm people. So apparently they are operating as an unofficial warming shelter. And
so I guess what I'm taking away from that is that there's some unofficial warming happening.
There is. And I don't know where all of them are, but I know we're out of time. But the one thing that I find most frustrating, and I may get deeper and find I'm totally wrong, and I'm willing to admit wrongness, but it really seems like the faith community wants to do something and is getting pushed aside. I've got a friend who's working on a plan through Christian Health Associates to put in a tiny little, I think 5 pallet shelters at Central Lutheran Church. Mm-hmm. And this other man is a Seventh-day Adventist, and he's just dying to do something to help and sending me messages all the time. What can I do to help? And I feel like that a lot of the volunteerism that churches used to take on, we're taking on through these organizations that are getting paid now. And the churches are wanting to, right now, I think my friend that is at Central Lutheran, they do a overnight on church warming. They let people stay, and a parishioner in the church has to sit up all night because they don't have a sprinkler system. But they put a lot of roadblocks to these churches wanting to help, and we need to figure out how to make it easier for them to be part of the solution. There has to be a code change for them to have the pallet shelters or their tiny little homes in their parking lots. And
God, Karen, that's your next bill. You are a policy person.
Okay.
And
but they've been talking about that for a year and nothing's happened. So I'm like, apparently that's too complicated.
I'll tell you really quickly as the last thing. The Betty Davis East Anchorage High School swimming pool has been closed for 7 months because there's no lifeguard. And our office will be offering scholarships for lifeguard training, and that there's no age limit as long as you can pass the thing. So if you're a retiree and you want to help the Betty Davis East Anchorage High School swim team have swim practice in their pool so that they're not being driven, bused, vanned inconveniently across town to Bartlett, they can do it in their own pool. And we can have swim lessons at
Good
that.
For you.
And I did not ask permission. And I had a staffer in the hallway yesterday who said, how did you do the scholarships? And I was like, I don't know. We have an office budget. And I thought we can probably do 5 $200 scholarships to open the swimming pool for my district. Like, how am I going to get in trouble for that? Yeah. How is somebody going to report me for? And so that's a long way of saying, we need to figure out what the barrier is to allowing churches to have warming centers and to eliminate those barriers.
Exactly.
Because that's stupid.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Sorry, I'm ranting.
No, it's preach.
Do you have a book you want to recommend to our listeners?
I don't read too many books right now. The binder is enough.
You're fine. You recommend the Assembly binder.
The Assembly binder is... It's a great read.
That is so funny. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. If you're interested in more information about becoming a municipal lifeguard, you can visit repgray.com/lifeguard. We have information about how to apply, and also you can reach out to our office for information about the scholarship. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.